AI used to be a distant promise. Now it permeates our lives. In just 3 years, we went from chit-chatting with ChatGPT to having them control our computers, write code, and beyond. We seem to do more with powerful agents, but are they actually augmenting us? We often find ourselves spending more time to fight against AI sloppiness, searching for subtle bugs and hidden incorrect facts. Multiply this across everyone. How does our society wrestle with AI reliance at a massive scale? It seems the hard part was never to build this technology, but to build a machine that can collaborate and work with people.
To me, again, human-centeredness is yet another North Star for AI, is that AI can be a family of technology and as well as products and services. But that North Star for me is benevolence for humanity and for individuals.
So, what does ideal collaboration look like? How do we develop AIs that augment our mind instead of replacing it?
As scientists, we were responsible for all uses of these technologies and the downstream effects, whether they be via malicious users or inadvertent, or even deeper currents of how the systems end up flowing into society and changing things.
These questions really fascinate us. If they resonate with you too, let's embark on this journey together. We've got some answers and thoughts to share with you.
Hello, I'm Yijia Shao from Stanford University.
Hi, I'm Michael Ryan, also from Stanford University.
Hi, I'm Shannon Shen from MIT, and welcome to the Augmented Mind Podcast. We care about how to use AI to augment people instead of automating the tasks.
Yeah, this is exactly the reason when we two chat about starting the podcast, right? So far there are a lot of channels sharing AI work. However, there is no existing channel to talk about human-centered AI work, and we think, well, we probably need something like this to better share like why this is also technical, but also touch a lot of part relevant to human and society.
Yeah, and actually that's sort of part of the reason we did something a little bit unhinged recently.
Oh yeah, exactly. So recently what we did is we kind of just find out people who is around me, and I send them some links to collect the hot takes around the human-centered work we are doing. So actually, I bring some of the hot takes today, and I will just read it out. The first one is, model will learn human-agent collaboration eventually on outcome reward over long horizon, so we don't need to study or model it.
Yeah, I think this take is very interesting. In a lot of ways, it's aligned with the bitter lesson, which suggests that as we, if we add these additional scaffolds to a system, it's going to actually wash out in the long term because we could just throw more compute at the problem.
So you are actually supporting this all
But not exactly, no. I think that there's actually an assumption in the bitter lesson, an important assumption, and maybe a valid assumption in many cases, that you know what you're optimizing for, and you have a specific objective that you're optimizing for. But I think in the human-centered condition, it's actually not clear what the exact objective should be. Different people, have very different ideas of what they want out of interacting with AI. And I actually think there's an importance to modeling and personalizing the outcome that you're potentially optimizing for.
This is a very good point. So basically, these hot takes say, oh, you'll just learn eventually on outcome reward. However, how to define the reward, right? What's the outcome?
Exactly.
This is actually the human problem we need to solve.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then building on top of that, so even though the bitter lesson says, through whatever compute, you can train better models in the end, but if you are only optimizing the outcome reward, you miss the whole collaboration process that can work with people in the middle, right? And I think that doesn't.
Can you elaborate a bit? What's the process?
Yeah, basically in the human-agent collaboration process, it's more or less like the agent should choose whatever they should do more work, or when they should talk to the person, talk to the user about asking what they want. And then if we simply only optimizing the outcome reward, the agent does not have the need to make sure the users are happy with this process, and then they can actually make them feel empowered, and then they can make them even using the agent more during this process.
And I think this actually ties in with a very interesting conversation I had the other day with someone about the idea of empathetic AI. And so I think a lot of times when people hear a term like empathetic AI, they think like an AI that's really nice to me or like really kind. But I think empathy can mean something else when we're talking about AI, which is like understanding the constraints and limitations of the user in a way. So like today, if I talk to ChatGPT about something, it might give me like a 5 to 10 paragraph essay explaining, like if I just asked a simple question. But that's not really the way that people like to communicate with one another or maybe appreciate the information being presented. And like reading all that text might be good for some people, but not others.
Yeah, I feel like even just within this very short discussion around the hot take, we already bring up a lot of problem, like technical challenge we need to solve. Even before you kind of say how you can train over long horizon, like how to actually get the outcome, or like even how to measure the process reward instead of the final outcome. Okay, so actually there's another one I think, well, this is even spicier. So this person is saying, human-agent collaboration is an illusion. Even if we adopt an automation versus augmentation view, as AI gets stronger, there will be less for us to work on.
Yeah, so I think this is another interesting take. This reminds me actually of this kind of economics concept called creative destruction.
This is the one that won the Nobel Prize, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And the idea is that as new technologies are created, they might disrupt an industry and change the way things are done, but it's actually supplanted by a new way of doing things. So I think like a clear example is back in the 1500s to 1700s, some in that time range. Almost everyone was involved in farming in some capacity, or a large percentage of the workforce, certainly. But if you look today, only 5% of Americans are farming and able to feed the rest of the country, essentially.
So what are the rest 95% of Americans doing, right? It's like,
exactly, like all these new jobs that were created by all these technological innovations. And in many ways, I think that it's difficult to see exactly what that will look like from this moment, but I have confidence in people's ability to find new and interesting ways to use a technology and adapt with the technology. That I'm confident that we're creating kind of new opportunities with this.
Yeah, totally. I feel right now AI is considered to be a technology, but not something that can derive their own goals and try to improve things. But actually, the goals coming from us, the people. And then I do have an analogy to think about how the AI can shape our work in the future. Whereas now we're motivated to do the work, right? Basically, we need to make it work, and then we just need to write the code, to write the passages, to write the papers, to show we did work. But I think in the future, it's more about us. We set the vision in terms of set the objectives to what to do. And this is what I feel like will be like sculptors in the future. Whereas now the AIs are the tools, the hammers, and then we should build up the visions in terms of how to use the tools to shape the stone to be something spectacular.
Okay, this is an interesting analogy. I remember someone also mentioned like there is a distinguish between task and goal. It seems like you are referring to something like this, right? You basically in the future, even we are not measuring like what are the work, what are the tasks people are doing, but potentially it's like this type of goal or like the sculptor's idea you are mentioning.
Right. I think the essence is right now people are rewarded for both doing the work and then setting the visions. But I think, for example, like Gemini 3 can do very, very good UIs very, very fastly.
So what those UI designers should.
Yeah, and then the question is, like what are the ways you can shape this UI to be more unique? You have these tools, you can do things for you very, very quickly, but then what are you going to use it for, right? For example, like in like a bigger research project now, you can have like a very nice demo to show to people very quickly, rather than just having like a crappy demo. But then the demo itself is not the goal of that bigger, like a goal of that research project.
This is a very good point. I think right, you are doing research not for just building a demo.
Right.
Right.
Right, because you have something bigger you want to achieve in the end. That doesn't mean the AI can behave for you to achieve the goal or set the goal for you. It's you who decide who you want to be and then what you want to achieve. But then this is give you like a more convenient or more, I don't want to say like fast, but I feel like this give you like a quick way to play with things and then try to help you to achieve thing you want to achieve. And then this might be evolved or maybe shaped as a new type of work in the future.
That's a very good point. So basically, even in the future, maybe people are not doing this task, but more like they are providing these goals or like auditing the AI systems. So this potentially be like from the technical side, then how should we build a technology that is easy to audit or easy to follow people's goals? Then it's still a long way to go.
Right, I agree completely. Yeah, I think that's part of the reason we want to do this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So even on my list, I still got many other hot takes which are very spicy, but due to the time, I won't just read out all of them. But just like Michael said, this is exactly why we want to share this podcast. Like many people, when they have this kind of skepticism about this human-centered AI work we are doing, is because they're not really knowing what these works are about, right? They never really got into the chance to look into the paper or like the technical details. So we really hope the AM podcast would be a way for researchers to share about their work or just to rouse public awareness and discussion.
Yeah, totally. And then this is where we want to explore some kind of new form to present this podcast. We want to find the right balance between the technology and also all the stories, all the visions, all the seeing, adventures happen during the course of research. And also, this is like a very dynamic field of research. So if we focus too much on the technology, maybe we might lose the bigger vision of what's going on in the industry. So basically, we will invite people to present some of their technology or maybe their technical aspects of their papers or projects, but also we want to do like a deep dive of their, like their visions in the field and also all the stories behind the research.
Yeah.
I would also say, I would go so far as to say a misperception that human-centered work is less technical, but I think that part of the reason we're also doing this is to showcase the technical side of the work. And I think I have like a really key example I'd love to share.
Sure.
That I think human variation is like this really interesting thing that comes from like the diversity of people, right? So I think a lot of domains of computer science don't share this exact problem where like you can optimize a static benchmark and try to achieve a high score on a static benchmark. But if you're trying to optimize something for people, people have all these different values, beliefs, lived experiences, and at the end of the day, too, people can be kind of noisy data, right? Like
Two people are already very noisy, like we two chatting now. It's already very noisy, right? Suppose you have a group of people that's even crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And like if you ask someone a question one day and you ask them the next day, like their answer is going to probably change slightly or significantly. And so I think like people are these complex beings, right? Of course. And I think like this is a challenge in modeling and optimization. There's one example that I think is pretty interesting. It was from Deepak Kumar, who was a Stanford postdoc at the time he did this, but now he's a professor at UCSD. And so the paper was called Designing Toxic Content Classification for a Diversity of Perspectives. And what they were looking at is like, there are all these classifications of toxic comments, right? Like the Google Perspectives API was intended to tell you, if a comment on like a social media platform is toxic or not. But what they found was that surveying like a wide population of people, based on like their lived experiences and backgrounds, especially things like their age or if they were a member of the LGBTQ plus community, they would have very different opinions on whether a comment was toxic or not. And so what they found is like there were sentences or comments that the Google Perspectives API would classify as 90% sure that this is a toxic comment, but there was actually only 50% agreement when they looked at the different diverse groups that were looking at this. So I think like in some ways you can try to optimize like a single number, like are we going to classify this correctly? But when you actually dig in and try to look at like what are the differences in opinions that people have, it makes these problems like even harder to solve, but more rewarding at the same time.
Right, totally. And this reminds me of the jury learning work by Mitchell Gordon, who was at Stanford, now he's a professor at MIT. But I think there's an even higher level thoughts that I have, which is like maybe, annotation might die in the future.
What do you mean by annotation?
Yeah, so, like if we narrowly define like an annotation is something like, we recruit people from the platforms and then pay them to label for something they would not regularly do in their day-to-day life, right? But actually, I feel like now the models are powerful enough. They can give us like just like Ted Chiang said, like an average image of like people doing these tasks on the internet, right? But then actually what's going to be really interesting is how can we extract people do their real things in their real life, and then they will try their best to do the work. For example, like writing the prompts in Cursor. And I feel like that's going beyond the simple notion of annotation, but just like live collecting this data from the users and then trying to co-involve with this
This
user.
is actually very interesting. If you think about like even language model pre-training, right? It's not like I hire millions of people and Amperk to write down things, but it's like just the internet provides all the data.
The natural, the organic thing people would do on the internet, which they try their best to do it well.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So maybe I think even just within the discussion, I found one technical challenge is like how we can actually make sense of this noisy data, right? In the future, it's not like we have a task, we recruit people to provide really clean data and we apply an ML or AI algorithm on it. Instead, it's like we really want to go into the zone to look at how we can make sense of the noisy data, and suppose we can get it, how can we really leverage the results to benefit human well-being?
Yeah, totally. And then maybe one minor point to add is, one thing is how can we leverage this like raw, noisy data, but also the other is what mechanism can we design to, have a more structured way to collect data more actively from people. I'm not saying we should incentivize people to use this technology more, but again, this is an example by Cursor, which is, I write the best prompts that I can write for Cursor, not because I'm addicted to Cursor, but because I want to do the work the best, right? And then this interesting mechanism can give us a way to collect more data, and then can use the data to we should do some sort of like data collection and model training, co-design kind of things that, getting the most efficient data, most effective data, and then at a scale,
Anything you don't like about Cursor?
Oh no, I have a lot of complaints. I'm just saying Cursor is a good product, but I feel like just like many other products, AI products nowadays, there are always problems. But I feel like, in essence, Cursor is the first example that it can work with you very well. It solves some of these challenges. But I do think we can build better things using this like analogy of this having this workspace that can work with you very, very closely.
Yeah, I really hope in the following episodes of this podcast, we can actually share more work like this to really let people know, what are the cool technology we build, how we build it, and what's the problem behind and how we can make it even further. So to everyone in front of this episode, we really love you to be part of the journey, and please subscribe and leave your comments and let us know what are the guests or topics you want to hear from. Welcome again to the Augmented Mind Podcast, and let's get started.
Yeah, let's get started.